Hello everybody, welcome to this new series on the channel, and this time we're going to be building Tamiya's 1/48 scale P-51B. This is really just a finishing video, so the kit itself is a really straightforward build. Absolutely no problems at all, a fantastic fit, and this fuselage went together in just one or two sessions really. As you can see, it's a click fit just about. Absolutely no problems at all. Beautiful wing root join. The intake has been pre-painted. It's very difficult to get paint in there, and the underside of the kit actually is the hardest. The intake housing under the aircraft is the hardest thing to get right on the Mustang. Needs quite a bit of filler and rescribing. Just putting the tailplanes on here, and you can see using the cutting mat grid just to make sure you get the tailplanes nice and square. Another thing I'm pretty keen on is making sure that the wing trailing edges and leading edges are properly sanded down and filled. I'm just using some Mr. Surfacer here and just wiped away with a Q-tip or cotton bud, moistened in some thinners. Clean the surface with some alcohol and just masking the cockpit up, ready for painting. This coat is Mr. Surfacer 1500. It's the very finest of Mr. Surfacer grades, and I'm going around just to do a check of all the joints on the model. And once the primer's dry, just one coat of primer, that's all. Just a quick wipe down with some 8000 grit micro mesh. Just adding the last few details before fitting the canopy. This is the gun sight, which is from the kit. Just make sure it's nice and central. I usually try and give the canopies a bit of a clean. This is Tamiya's polishing compound and masking off just to sand the sprue gate off the windscreen there. This is Formula 500 canopy glue, which is just a white PVA, but it's really nice for fitting the transparencies on aircraft. This is a nice little trick that I like to use with masking tape, just to hold those flat side panels on until the glue's set. I invested in an Edward masking set for the canopy. Just save a bit of time on this. And it was a nice fit. Saved a good half hour masking the canopy up. I've got to using these Trinity splatters, these Van der Rosten Trinity splatters, just to add some mottling effect under the final paintwork, and I really like how they turn out. It's all dependent on how much you do on the top coat, but it's a technique that I'm developing at the moment, and as you can see, I'm just adding a little bit of panel line shading, pre-shading as well. Just doing the interior green for the canopy internal framework. And I'm going back with the mottle masks here just to add some Tamiya dark earth around the wheel wells and on the underside. And that dark earth will reflect a little bit of the grey, or through a little bit of the grey, providing at this stage you don't add too heavy a coat of the underside, which is Mr. Hobby neutral grey I've used for the undersides. So this technique of pre-shading using the mottle masks just gives you the ability to play around with the finish, just gradually build it up. And obviously the heavier that you go with this stage, the more of the mottle you're going to cover up. Masking off with some blue tack. I want a nice soft edge on the upper surface demarcation line. And again using Mr. Hobby acrylic olive drab. Same technique, just build the colour up gradually until you're happy with the effect that you're getting. So you're building in weathering straight away really using this effect. Usually once I've done a whole panel I'll draw the airbrush back a little bit, and that just allows me to blend the effect in across a wider area of the model's surface. On with the ID bands, so just flat white, and again I don't want a really solid colour here, so just gradually building the white up. No bands on the tail on this aircraft. Sometimes these ID bands extended onto the tail surfaces, but not on this aircraft. And not to forget to add the bands or extend the bands down onto the flaps, top and bottom. Just going across the surface now with a very fine sanding sponge. That just removes any last bits of dust or dirt from the paint surface. And I'm adding the noseband now in red. This is just Tamiya Flat Red XF7. It's a decent match for the checker bands on the nose. This is my gloss coat, which I like to use Tamiya X22 gloss varnish. And it goes down really nicely if mixed with either Mr. Hobby levelling thinners, which is a good choice, or Tamiya's lacquer thinners. On with the decals now, and this is from a super scale sheet, a fairly old super scale sheet. I just wanted to avoid using the Tamiya decals. The super scale decals are a bit thinner than the Tamiya and go on a little bit easier, I think. Just the usual routine, you've seen it before with Microset and Microsol. And these settled down really well into the engraved panel lines on the kit. Just checking port and starboard, making sure the fuselage insignia is level, both sides. And on with the rest of the fuselage markings. I actually broke the victory tally. You can see there, just having to stitch it back together again. The reason it broke was that I was trying to keep the film in shot, so I was at a really awkward angle holding the decal and managed to twist and break it, but it repaired well. You can't see the join now. Back with the microsole. And the nose bands, the checkers. A really colourful scheme, this aircraft. And the wash that I'm using is MiG Starship wash. This is an enamel wash, and I'm really just giving the panel lines a wash. I'm not into smothering the surface with washes. I just use a pin wash really. And I find that this stage with the Q-tip or cotton bud gives you a chance to blend the wash into the paint surface without soaking the whole thing in the wash. It's a bit more economical as well. Just doing a bit of blending on the inside of the wing there with the paintbrush and getting some streaking effects as well, drawing the Q-tip backwards in the airflow. Get some dirt and grime out of the exit for the radiator. We've applied a coat of Alclad light sheen varnish. That's another enamel varnish which I like to use, gives a really nice finish. And now just demasking the canopy. Just getting the last bits of dust out of the inside of the canopy. Mask the wheel wells off now and applying a coat of interior green. It's always exciting unmasking a model. Don't know what it is, I never get tired of it. Unless I've made a mess of it, of course, but I got away with it in this case. Just edging in the edge of the transparencies now, the transparent plastic with the interior green, just to give it a solid look. And now I'm painting the tail wheel. This has had a coat of rubber black overall, and I'm using Tamiya lacquer flat aluminium just to pick out the leg itself. This lacquer paints with a brush really nicely. It's really smooth, which is quite difficult for a metallic. But I use this all the time now for brush painting, particularly on undercarriages like this. It would take an absolute age to mask this up, so brush painting is much quicker. Giving the undercarriage legs and gear bay doors another enamel wash with the MiG Starship wash. The legs have just had some brake lines fitted with some fine wire. They're fairly prominent on the Mustang, so they're worth doing. And again, just blending a wash into the legs. I used some Edward Brassin wheels on this model because the ones in the Tamiya kit, first of all, they're not the right tread pattern. They're a diamond tread pattern, and these were block square treads on this particular aircraft. The hubs or the wheel faces themselves require the resin removing from the inside faces just to make them open. Pop the flaps on. The Tamiya flaps have got a really positive fit. Nice big lugs on them to go in. Just getting a bit of wash on the hubs. And this is an interesting thing on this particular aircraft because it's always a bit of a dilemma for modelers when you notice a detail like this where the white on the spinner was chipped away, because it can look as though you've just been sloppy with your painting, but actually that's how it looked. These are old Aeromaster decals for the prop blades, and because they're old I use some Tamiya decal adhesive there just to make sure they're stuck down properly. The Aeromaster Hamilton Standard logos are much more accurate than what comes in the kit. Got proper gold in the marking. Drilling out a hole in the tip of the spinner, which is missing from the kit, and now we'll just assemble the blades onto the spinner back plate. They're a nice positive fit and they are keyed so you get the right angle on the blades. Just a bit of super glue here for this job. Just make sure everything's nice and square. Again, you can use the cutting mat grid to make sure that you've got that accurate. Pop the spinner front on. And we'll get that straight onto the aeroplane. It's got the usual poly cap inside, so we don't need any glue or anything on that. It will rotate. For those of us that like to play with our models after we've built them. This is just a silver pencil just to add some chipping to the leading edge of the prop blades. And photographs show that the tips, the yellow tips, were quite well eroded as well. So I use this silver pen to replicate that. And just tracing around some of the panel lines on the engine cowling, just to simulate the wear from removing them. On with the exhausts. These are from the Tamiya kit with the exhaust openings drilled out. Back to the 500 canopy glue now to put the transparencies on. Just a quick clean off and a wipe with some water just to get rid of any spillage. Just a few dots for the small side opening window which drop down onto the side of the fuselage, and I've added a couple of Edward handles for the side window just to give it a bit more detail. This is Tamiya Sparkling Silver, again a lacquer paint, just to pre-paint the lamp transparencies. These are the ID lights on the underside of the wing. And some Mr. Hobby clear red. Over the top of the silver just adds a little bit of sparkle through the clear paint. So we've got red, green and amber on the ID light lamps on the underside. Just rigged the aerial mast with some Ushi van der Rosten very fine thread, elastic thread. There are actually two aerial masts on the aircraft, the tall one that I'm affixing now and the little white terminal a couple of spaces behind that, this one here, which also goes to the same position on the fin leading edge. You'll see the aerial mast and aerial later on in the still photographs. It's hard to pick it out against the background there. On with the pitot tube. And there we're all done. So this actually was done over the space of probably about 8 months. I had other projects going on in the shed, and this was just languished on the shelf at the back for a while. I'm glad it's done, and I'm really pleased with the outcome. If you want a nice, relaxed, easy build to get your mojo back at any time, this is a great kit to do that with. Goes together, as I said, no problems at all, and it's a nice, relaxing, easy build. So I hope you like the result, and that you'll join me for the next in this video series. So thanks for joining me for this one, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.